I set up EmuDeck on my old Steam Deck OLED, and I've tried setting it up on the ROG Ally X, but for some reason it didn't work the way I wanted it to work on the ROG Ally X. I've always had trouble trying to put it in full screen. Emulation Station was a little bit weird at the time that I tried it, and I just completely gave up on it. And also switching to a different front-end launcher can be kind of a big hassle for me. That's one of the reasons why I just stuck with the Steam Deck OLED when doing emulation. So in that emulation field, whenever I'm emulating higher end games like AAA games or graphically intense games, I would stick with the Steam Deck OLED. I never formally made a tutorial on how to set up emulation on Steam Deck OLED, and emulation has gone pretty far now in 2025. So we're going to talk about the easiest way to set up emulation on the Steam Deck OLED, and that I've personally used for a while now, EmuDeck. So EmuDeck, in my opinion, would be the easiest way to do emulation because all the games that you have loaded through EmuDeck, you can launch it directly from the Steam Deck library, and that just takes a lot of hassle out of it. But let's say you have thousands of games that you want to emulate, then you can also set up Emulation Station through EmuDeck too. And because EmuDeck sets up everything for you, it pretty much takes away any problems that you might have setting it up yourself. And this also takes away other options where you have to boot into other separate softwares, and the only thing you would really need to do is go into desktop mode on the Steam Deck. So with this emulation guide, there's one thing I won't be discussing, and that will be where you be getting these ROM files and these BIOS files. Those are copyrighted files, and it's not my place to say where you can get these. Okay, starting this emulation guide, here's the Steam Deck. If you look at the bottom, there's already a SD card in there, 1 terabyte. And I'm pretty proficient with the trackpads, so I would only need my ROM drive. This ROM drive has all my ROM files and all my BIOS files, so everything is in here the way I need it. So let's turn this on. Okay, so we go to Steam, settings, go down to storage. I already have it formatted. There's a 1 terabyte SD card and there's nothing on it at this time. So now we can go to Steam and we'll go right to desktop mode. Here we are on desktop mode. We're gonna go to Firefox or whichever internet browser you have and look up. It would just go Steam X, it'll pull up the keyboard. So we are going for EmuDeck. You search it, should be right here. So here's the page for you to get EmuDeck, emulation made easy on SteamOS. We're just gonna hit download here. And while we're here, you can see the options that we have: SteamOS, Linux, Chimera OS, and Windows, Android. We're just gonna go to SteamOS and we're gonna download for free. They also have a Patreon page if you do want to support the devs, but we're just gonna go for the download for free right now. Go here. When you're here, just open up and execute. Continue and just let it run. So here we have easy mode and custom mode. We're gonna want to go through custom mode just so we can have more choices. So we go custom mode, next. And then our SD card right here is where we're going to put all our ROMs. You could do internal storage or custom directory, whichever one you want, but I would recommend using the SD card that you put in to keep things separate, just so it's easier to navigate. So we can go next, and Steam Deck's already selected. Next. Now we have all these emulators selected. All those older emulators like Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, N64, Super Nintendo, they all fall under RetroArch, so we don't really need it. And then there are Metro Prime, I never really use it, so I'm just gonna deselect it. I don't really know what that is. I do have some Scum VM games, but I'm not gonna be playing that on the Steam Deck. I'm just gonna leave the rest as is. In this section, basically EmuDeck is asking if you want to optimize any of these emulators towards kind of like the Steam Deck settings. Since we're starting new, we can leave this the way it is and we can hit next. So here EmuDeck's asking if we want to turn on any autosave. I recommend turning it on because after you leave the game and come back to it, it's just going to bring you to exactly where you left off. So it's a really good setting to have. The next one asks for RetroArch achievements or retro achievements. If you have an account with retro achievements, you could log in here and then all your achievements will be linked up together. I don't have one, so going on to the next one, game bezels. I do like keeping the game bezels on. It does make it feel a little bit more nostalgic, but this is for your preference. You could have it off or you could have it on. I'm going to leave it on. Now we have the aspect ratios for those classic Sega systems. We can go for 3:2, which is a little bit more stretched. Same thing with here. I do like to keep it the default here as well. GameCube games, there are widescreen hacks for most of the games. I do like playing widescreen for GameCube, but always you can see here there are some graphical glitches for the games that don't have those widescreen hacks. Going next, now we have shaders. I love playing with shaders. They just make the game look so much cooler. Right now this is kind of like the default where the colors are boosted and everything, but if you want things to look more closer to the original, you could turn on the shaders and you can see the scan lines and you can see the colors from how it was originally. CRT is the same thing. CRT TVs have different kinds of filters to them. The colors are also a little bit different. As you can see here, this one's more bright. Everything is more flat in a sense. This is what you would see close to the original and on a regular CRT TV. And then CRT for 3D games, they do look a little bit weird with these scan lines. So for these 3D games specifically, like PlayStation 1, Dreamcast, Saturn, and N64, I like to keep that off and just play it as is because this hurts my eyes sometimes. So let's go back to off and then hit next. Now controller layout. This XYBA layout is how it is for Nintendo games, and a lot of Nintendo games are positioned this way. I like to keep it that way because whenever I jump, I use the middle of my thumb like this to jump rather than pressing the button itself. So I do like holding the Y button as shown in the picture, or you can have it match completely where it's like A, B, X, Y. You can have it match. But for retro games, this kind of confused me, so I like to go with how it was originally. We can do different front ends for the Steam Deck. I'm not going to use it that much because I like launching the game specifically from the Steam library. But if I was to only play retro games, I would use Emulation Station desktop version because it's very customizable. I don't really use Pegasus. The only other one that I use is Daijisho. So we're going to have that turned off, and then this is what we want. Integrate your games inside your Steam library. This is what I like using the most. So next from there, here's a bunch of different themes for Emulation Station. The one I usually use is ports, but there's also a couple other nice ones too. So let's be a little bit fancy and pick cathode. This one's really cool because they also preview the game on a smaller TV too. So we're going to do that. Now here, it would tell you what options you picked. So it's kind of an overview. So it would install Cemu, Citra, Dolphin, DuckStation, Melon DS, Model 2, PCSX2, PPSP, RetroArch, RPS3. Just the main important ones: Super Ryujin, Super Mono, Vita 3K, Cemu, and Xenia. So let's go. And now we just let it sit and run. All right, you can see here that everything is all set. So we can hit next. We're going to do a manual copy. We're going to open the emulation folder. That's open. Now we can take our hard drive and we're going to plug into the Steam Deck. Once we plug it into the Steam Deck, it's pretty straightforward where you can put your files. So this is going to pop up, mount and open. So I have my emulators with my BIOS and ROMs here. I'm going to go into BIOS, take all my BIOS files and put it into the BIOS folder here. So here I have all the BIOS files I need. PS3, PS1, PS2 are these. So after you move all your BIOS files, you go into ROMs. You're going to see a massive collection of folders that tells you where you can put your ROMs. Now you're questioning where to put specific ROMs. You can always go into their system info text and it'll tell you what files they actually accept in each folder. We're gonna go on and start moving all our ROMs. So I have these. It would take a minute to go through all these, so it's pretty straightforward. We're just gonna start doing this. If you have a lot of ROMs, it would take a longer time, but if you don't have a lot of ROMs, then it'll be a quick process. But once you finish placing all your ROMs in BIOS, you can hit close, you can hit next, and now EmuDeck starts asking if you want to have it through Steam Library or Emulation Station or Pegasus. I like having everything set from Steam Library. With Steam Library, it's just easier for me to head into these different ROMs, and there's a whole ROM manager to it. So the next step would be launching that Steam ROM manager. So here you hit choose, make sure it chooses yourself, save, next. Now you can start parsing the games. So here you hit finish, you open up Steam ROM Manager. So at this point, you can leave everything on. Steam ROM Manager would take care of it for you if you're unsure. I recommend if you have a huge library like I do, I would just leave what they have on, because they'll just detect what games you have and then select them for you. So the next step after this would be adding the games. You just hit parse and it will go through all your folders and have all the games added. Now there are some games that you don't want to add. You can hit exclude games and then you can start deselecting them. Once you're satisfied with everything, you can start hit save to Steam. This part will take a bit. Once it's done retrieving everything, it should say done. If not, you can hit save to Steam again just to make sure that actually follows through. So once that's all set, it will say done. Okay, it says it's done. Okay, I just realized after adding all the ROMs, the best method for me, since I have over 1,000 games, was to use Emulation Station. But I'm just going to keep going through with EmuDeck, and there are a couple of pointers. First, after adding your BIOS and your ROMs and everything's working, your PS3 emulator might not work that well, or there's a firmware that's missing. To fix that problem, you would go into wherever your PS3 emulator is. So for me, that would be in my applications folder. So you would double click it, run the program. When you're running the program, you can see that all the games are here. I already have the firmware added, so there's not a problem here now. But to install your firmware, just hit File, Install Firmware, and you would go to where you downloaded that PS3 update file. Once you click it, hit open, then sure, just to see how it looks like. Boom. It would say that everything is successfully installed and that's all set. So now you can turn this off. And for the forbidden emulator, if you already have the app image, make sure you rename it to the name of the emulator .APP_IMAGE. It's case sensitive, so make sure you have it in this format. And you just drop that file into your applications and EmuDeck would be able to see the files. Now, since we have all the emulators added and all the ROMs added, we can go back to gaming mode. And once you go back to gaming mode, all your games will be inside the library. So you go into Steam, library, and all your games will be in a collection as shown like this. When you have everything inside Emulation Station, you could just run Emulation Station itself. And when you run Emulation Station, all your games will be right there front loaded. So this is the theme that I like going with for the Steam Deck, just because there's some cool aesthetics to it. They show every single emulator through a small CRT TV or a plasma screen TV. I just thought this is a really cool look. And if you have everything scraped already, then it will show the media to the game with the box previews and things like that. To get that set up, make sure you just go into your scraper. You can pick Games DB or Screenscaper. I do Games DB. I just like a lot of their choices more. And then I want to scrape emulators. I don't have Xbox on there. I do have MAME on there, Nintendo 3DS, 64, DS, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Color, GameCube, SNES, Forbidden One, Wii U, Dreamcast, Genesis, Neo Geo, Station 2, and PS Portal. And now it's just going to scrape all the box arts for me. When I want to scrape these systems, we can see that PlayStation 3 isn't included. To fix that problem, we would just go into desktop mode, and to get PlayStation 3 to show up on Emulation Station, we would go into your folders and go into where your PS3 games are. So in these PS3 games, what you would do is add that extension .ps3, and you do that for all of them. I'm gonna do that real quick. So I just finished adding all the extensions PS3 to all my game folders. So now it should show up on Emulation Station. To be a little bit more sure, I'm going to turn on EmuDeck and go and parse through Steam ROM Manager again, just so I can know that it will show up for sure. Now let's run Emulation Station again, and all PS3 games should show up now. We're going to go to Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, GameCube, Wii U, Dreamcast, Genesis, Geo, Station 2, Station 3. Right here. PlayStation 3 is now showing. So now we have to go into our settings and go into other settings, alternative emulators, going down to PS3, and it should be standalone. I like using the standalone so that I don't run into any other problems. It's just a little bit easier. I don't really touch the older emulators, so I like to leave those as current because they do run through RetroArch. The only problem is GBA has a MGBA standalone. If you do the standalone here, it's gonna go through the MGBA emulator itself. But if you want to keep using RetroArch, which is what we have set up, then I would stick with default. Okay. Now let's go back and then go to scraper. Now we can scrape everything and start that. Depending on how many games you have, it can take a while. I have over 2,628 games that still didn't get scraped yet, so it's going to take a while for me. Okay, once you have all the scrapers completed, you can see that in each different emulator, there are different box arts for them. There's also videos that play as a preview to show you the games as well, which is one of the reasons why I like this theme the most. Different arcade games, and it shows it in kind of like arcade box too, which is super neat. So the use of Emulation Station is by preference, but I would recommend using this if you have a lot of games, just so it's easier for you to kind of navigate through. Other than that, if you don't use Emulation Station, the games are going to be in your library as well, so you don't really have to use it. They'll be categorized by different consoles in your library, so it's not that hard to navigate through. So we're gonna run some different games, and you can see here it's launching the game and it works. Right now is compiling the shaders. After it finishes compiling it, then the game should start. You can see that it's going to the title screen of the game. Right, as you can see, the game works, and when you want to exit it, just to go back to Emulation Station, just hit the Steam button and go to switch windows to ESDE. You can also close this window and you're back in Emulation Station. So a small disclaimer about Emulation Station: when you do have Emulation Station set up, and you do set your PS3 files with the extension .ps3 so it can get recognized on Emulation Station, you're not going to be able to launch the games through the Steam library, but instead you have to use Emulation Station. So that's one of the downsides that you had to go through when you're deciding to pick between launching it directly from Steam or launching it from Emulation Station. So again, this falls back to what I recommended before, where if you have a small selection of games, then you would do the Steam library launch. It's just much easier and more efficient to use. But when it comes to having like 392 Game Boy games or like 365 Game Boy Color games, all adding up to over 1,000 games, then I would use Emulation Station just because it looks nicer and kind of brings that nostalgic vibe. Also, the organization is a lot easier. And what's cool is that even if we go through all that, once you go to the home, you can see all the games that you launched previously. Now, let's say you want to add games. The process is fairly simple. You would go to your Dolphin file manager, and then you go to your removal devices where your ROMs are, emulation, and ROMs, and then you just drag the files in. You go back to EmuDeck, and then you would go to Steam ROM Manager and then you would parse. After it finishes parsing it and retrieves all those ROMs, then you hit save to Steam, and then you'd be all set. Okay, that would be how the setup would work, and is, to my knowledge, the most updated way to get EmuDeck running on your Steam Deck. Broken down, the steps are going to desktop mode, grabbing EmuDeck. After grabbing EmuDeck, you follow the installation on EmuDeck using custom mode so that you can input your preferences. You move your ROMs and BIOS files into their appropriate folders. You will go through a parser using Steam ROM Manager and then adding those games to Steam. Once that's all set, you're all good. You can also track to the side a bit using EmuDeck to set up Emulation Station, and that's as simple as just getting it to run. Once you get it running, you can go to Emulation Station and everything should still be set up the same way and you have everything there. Only problem is if you want to see your PS3 games, you would have to change the file extensions to .ps3. But if you do that, then you wouldn't be able to play it directly from your Steam library. If there's a fix to that, please let me know down in the comments because I can't find a fix for that. So yeah, that is how you get EmuDeck. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys have any other questions. And also another way for you guys to help out this channel is to share this video to a friend that's still struggling on setting up EmuDeck on the Steam Deck. Give this video a like, and as always, subscribe. Thanks guys. Peace.